Welcome to Seggs Talk Radio, a podcast that explores kink and sex through candid and curious conversations. Join me and expert guests in exploring taboos and unpacking what it means to be sex and kink positive. Go check out our new website, sextalkradio.com. That is SEGGS talkradio.com. And I hope you enjoy the episode. Would you say that money and sex are two of the biggest themes that couples bring?
For sure.
Yeah.
Money and sex are probably the things that couples fight about the most consciously, and they become the biggest vehicle for deeper problems in the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. This episode of Seggs Talk Radio is brought to you by the HUD app. The HUD app is changing the face of modern and casual dating by giving users a really fun and flirty interface. And also it has bedroom features where you can select all of the kinky and naughty things you're into and show those to potential future partners. I personally love using the HUD app, and I think it's a great system for finding kinky people near you. Go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/SEGGS talk TALK for more. When I started optimizing my life around my menstrual cycle, everything changed for the better. That is why I love the Stardust app. It is far more than a period tracker. It is an entire hormonal health universe inside of an app. I've been using it for quite a while now, and what I love the most is the beautiful design. I love that I can share my cycle with a friend or with a partner. I get customized notifications, and I've learned so much about my cycle and about hormones. So wherever you get your apps, search for the Stardust app, and I look forward to your thoughts. I want to introduce you guys to Aria, which is a groundbreaking intimacy concierge service for couples. It can help you deepen and explore your relationship and energize it through curated experiences called scenes. I recently received the Sense scene, which was all about sensory play and pleasure mapping with my partner. It came with a premium pinwheel toy, a finger vibrator, and a satin blindfold, as well as a really good custom curated playlist. I had so much fun exploring this scene. If you're ready to spice it up with Aria, go to arya.fyi/STR for 15% off today. Not everyone wants a purple sparkly dildo, so when Peep Show Toys reached out to me and sent me their line of the Solina hyper-realistic, body-safe, platinum-grade silicone dildos, I was super excited. When I say they are realistic looking, I'm serious. They are very hyper-realistic. They are soft on the outside, they are firm on the inside, and they have a suction on the bottom for hands-free play if that's what you are into. Go to peepshowtoys.com and use code SEX, SEGGS, for 10% off of your entire order. Dr. Kate Balestrieri, welcome to Seggs Talk Radio.
Thanks so much for having me.
Super excited to have you. It feels like a long time coming, and I really enjoy your content.
Thank you. Likewise.
Could you share with the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I am a clinical and forensic psychologist, a certified sex therapist, a PACT trained couples therapist, a certified sex addiction therapist, and I own a therapy practice across the country called Modern Intimacy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You just came out with a book, What Happened to My Sex Life.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All of the things. I was intrigued to learn about the forensic work you did earlier on in your career. Could you share a little bit about that and kind of what motivated you to go into that line of work?
Of course. So a forensic psychologist is someone who engages in clinical practice in some kind of a legal setting.
Yes.
So in my work, I have worked in correctional settings. I've done evaluations for the court, and I sometimes will help do some consulting work with attorneys, things of that nature. And I think what you're referring to is really the work that I did with sex offenders and sexually violent persons who were committed to treatment way back when. So yeah, it was really...
Sounds hard.
Well, yes, it was hard. Of course, it was hard to hear a lot of the details about some of the things that that the folks had done.
Yeah.
But it was really fascinating work and helped me develop a deeper understanding of the meaning that sex can have in people's lives and the ways that people can use sex as a vehicle to communicate other needs that they may have.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm intrigued by it because I want to be having productive conversations about sex and sexuality. And I think that so much of the time it's a perpetrator, it's a bad guy, we're locking them up, we're not talking about it. And it's very hush hush. And I think that sex is such a huge thing to take on when we talk about it in Western society and all around the world, that I think it's important to look at all the different facets and why people do the things they do.
Of course. I think when people hear that I worked with sex offenders, they immediately kind of go to that same place, right? And I think as a society, we think, let's lock someone up, throw away the key, then we don't have to worry about the problem of sexual violence.
Right.
But the reality is the folks who engage in sexual violence are human beings. They are complex human beings, and how they got there is important to understand, because
definitely
it's in our culture in a really big way. So trying to just locate responsibility in the individual doesn't do us any justice as a society to understand better how we can engage in conversations around prevention.
Definitely. I think a big part of that is the crazy lack of sex education and lack of consent education. And I don't know the stats, but, so many women have been sexually assaulted. And, I think that there are probably a lot of men that wouldn't even know what they did was non-consensual. Like, I think that there is just a huge lack of education. And, I think people partying and drinking, like, things can get so messy and blurry, and it's complex. So what took you from that to wanting to be a sex therapist?
Well, after working in those settings for several years, I started to feel the tax of being in these systems and settings that were really underfunded and under-resourced. And it felt very difficult to make the kind of impact that I really wanted to be able to make in this work. Mm-hmm. So moving into private practice gave me a lot of opportunity to lean into things like prevention and helping people heal in ways that maybe were less encumbered by the demands of a correctional setting.
Definitely. And what led you to the sex focus?
Well,
kind of. Yes.
Sex is fun.
Yes.
No, I think, honestly, if you had asked me when I was starting grad school as just a baby therapist, if I was going to be a sex therapist, I probably would have laughed at you. And never would I have imagined that this would be my trajectory.
Yeah.
But because I am a sexual being, I love sex. It's great. I mean, good sex. Mm-hmm. But also having worked in the settings that I worked with populations that I worked with, I had a different training and a different level of understanding of the complexities of sexuality.
Yes.
And I realized that so many therapists don't get great training around sex. And when I started teaching, we would often talk about kind of the two big gaps for therapists in their training is around sexuality and around money.
Like the two biggest things that rule our society and intimate relationships.
Exactly. Right. So since I had a lot of training in understanding sexuality, for me, it was a really easy parlay to take that and be able to have conversations with people really candidly. Whereas some folks don't feel as comfortable talking about sex because they don't have that training.
It's a muscle to flex. I mean, I remember my very first episode I recorded. I was super nervous. I'd only ever talked to my girlfriends about it behind closed doors. Right. And suddenly I was talking to people on camera. And it's like, now I think I can sometimes make people uncomfortable because I bring it up so freely. And then people are like, oh, wow, like you just talk about sex. And there's practice there. Mm-hmm. So would you say that money and sex are two of the biggest themes that couples bring?
For sure.
Yeah.
Money and sex are probably the things that couples fight about the most consciously, and they become the biggest vehicle for deeper problems in the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. So when do you feel like people find couples therapy in their journey? Is there any kind of general
There's a few different trajectories for people. Sometimes folks are really mental health savvy. They've benefited from their own individual therapy, and they want to proactively strengthen their relationship, have an objective outsider say, hey, here are the patterns, here's what we're seeing, here's what you can do about it.
Yeah.
And then there's some folks who seek out therapy because they've hit a pain point in their relationship that they don't know how to move past with, the skills that they already do have. So they bring in outside help.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like the relationships I've been in, it would fall under more of the category of the pain point thing. Like something's going on and almost like, dragging the guy along into therapy, which might be something you see. Yes. I mean, through my sexual exploration journey and through also being on the more dominant side and exploring with men that are like, I don't know, a bit more comfortable with their emotions and their feminine traits, I've gained a lot of empathy for men, which I feel like I hadn't had prior, in terms of how societally they're really made to feel disconnected from their emotions and not allowed to talk about it or have certain softer traits. Or I've just gained this kind of like love and empathy for men that I didn't have before because of how much they're up against also under the patriarchy and society.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. There's even a term for what you're describing.
Oh.
Yeah. It's called normative male alexithymia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is it a diagnosis?
No, it's not in the DSM as a diagnosis. It's alexithymia is a term that basically means that somebody has a hard time knowing how they're feeling. They have feelings, of course, we all do. Nobody is without emotion.
Yeah.
They have feelings, but they have a hard time knowing how they're feeling, discerning between emotions, naming them, and communicating them. And the reason that the prefix normative male alexithymia is there is because this is such a common aspect of men in their gender role socialization over their lifespan. They are conditioned to not understand their feelings. They're told that they're logical, not emotional.
Yes.
And so over time, it really erodes their ability to have the fluency of understanding of their own emotional process or other people's emotional process. And it can lead to a lot of pain for men and for the people who love them and who are around them, because it's really hard to sit with feelings that you don't necessarily know what to do with or how to describe.
That's really interesting. I kind of relate to that, the terminology of not knowing what feeling you're feeling. Like when I was a preteen and a teenager and I hadn't started the reps of therapy yet, it's, I think especially anger is one for women that is really uncomfortable and scary. Yeah. And I feel like it's quite normalized and accepted for men. And I never want to make too many generalizations, but
Yeah, of course. No group is a monolith. But definitely men are typically given more permission to channel all of their emotional expression into anger because it's perceived as tough then, which aligns with the demands of masculinity that most men are told they need to uphold in one way or another, whereas women are often told not to show their anger directly and indirectly, right? Because we often communicate anger as a form of power. And so it makes sense that when we live in a patriarchy, men would be given permission to exhibit powerful emotions.
Oh, wow.
And women would be conditioned to inhibit power-generating emotions.
Oh, my God. That's profound. It is. I love some of the stuff you've talked about the patriarchy, and wow, that's powerful. Yeah. So for women, it's anger is related to power, and therefore it's not accepted for us to express it. That definitely hits. I don't know if you were talking about it on Instagram or we talked about it on our call, but you were talking about the rise and consistency of transphobia in our society. And you mentioned about how it's harder to control if there's more than two genders. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about that. A little bit of a pivot, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, of course. Look, we live in a world where there are systems that keep certain people in power and certain people out of power. And when you are in the group of people who wants to stay in power, your goal is to figure out how best to do that. And the easiest way to control people is to get them into an us and a them way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
And because we have many different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, one of the quote unquote easiest ways to enforce conformity and control is through reiterating a false binary in gender, right? Because, look, our brains are super complex because humans are complex.
Yeah, a lot of spectrums.
But we also don't love complexity because where there's complexity, there can be ambiguity and unknown. So when you stoke fear in people, the easiest way to provide a solution for that fear is to create a dichotomous resolution, a black and white, male or female.
Yeah.
Right? And so the easiest way to get control over people is to assert this binary conceptualization of sex or gender. And as we've seen in history, the ways that corrupt and powerful groups try to wield more power, one of the first strategies that they employ is to really emphasize and create a lot of propaganda around a binary understanding of sex and gender. Because once you do that, then you can define those categories and you can expect people to perform to the expectations of those categories. So anyone who does something different gets labeled as an other, right? Because they're not capitulating to these expectations. So the rise in transphobia and all of the discourse around trans rights and everything that's going on right now, in my opinion, is a result of that.
Yeah. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the people that are trans, like I think it's less than 1%. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, it's a bizarre hyperfixation, really. Totally. But when you understand sort of the Machiavellian obsession with power and control, it is the perfect strategy to evoke fear. Because if you're successful in creating an other, then you can scapegoat that other with all of society's problems. And that not only keeps people in a state of fear, but it also keeps people focused in the wrong direction. Definitely. Yeah. And distracted. Distracted from a lot of things.
Right. It's a great Wizard of Oz strategy. Pay no attention to what's happening behind the curtain. Look over there at that scary thing.
Totally. Yeah. Speaking of history, I don't really know how to go with this question, but I just love history. I'm a little bit of a sex nerd too. Like when it comes to history, like I find it fascinating to just learn about how people were doing it hundreds or thousands of years ago. Does anything come to mind kind of in the same line of like maybe what sex used to be like before certain power models came into place with society or, I don't know. Any historical sex nerdy things that you can think of?
Also, can we make t-shirts that say sex nerd?
Yes.
I think that's a really fun idea.
Or sex history.
History nerd.
Yes.
I mean, we have a lot of data that suggests that before patriarchy became a thing, people were a lot more free with pleasure. There was a lot of what we would today call non-monogamy happening.
And gender fluidity and like orgies. Like I've read all sorts of stuff about Greek history. And like,
well, even that,
but even
that is patriarchal in some ways. But I mean, sex has been such an interesting lens to view humanity through across historical moments in time because every sort of grouping of time has a different way that sex has been used to control people or a different way that sex has been permitted to be expressed. But there was a lot of what we might think today is like free love and everybody do what you want to do way back when. And at different moments in history, there's been more emphasis on what should be attached to sexuality. And that sort of introduction of morality around sex has a lot to do with the way that control and power are wielded.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, even seeing how it's shifted so much, I feel like in the last 100 years, like it's very interesting times we're in right now with a lot of open discourse about non-monogamy and kind of the realities of infidelity, I think is really important. It seems like more couples are having those conversations early on. You would know more than me about, divorce rates and infidelity rates. And like, yeah, I just feel like there's more open communication earlier on in relationships of what if A, B, and C happens.
Yeah. I think there are a few main themes that I see.
Yes.
There are folks who sort of go along and they do what they believe to be is expected of them when it comes to love, sex, and relationships or marriage. And then there are folks who question everything that they've been told they should do about love, sex, relationships, and marriage. And both groups of folks stumble because we are complex beings. So there's not just one path that makes sense for everyone.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There are a couple of chapters in your book that I'd like to talk about. I think the first one is it Do I Have to Say Yes? Is that what it's called?
I think so, yeah.
I would love to talk a little bit about that. So that focuses on kind of coercion and sexual relationships and long-term relationships. I'd love to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote that chapter because in my practice over the years, one of the biggest themes that I see happening that really eclipses someone's relationship with desire is the experiences that they've endured throughout their life with regard to sexual entitlement or coercion, in addition to sexual violence. I mean, coercion is a form of sexual violence.
Yeah.
But it's not always so obvious to people that they are coming up against coercion or violence, and it can be quite covert. So in long-term partnerships, there's a lot of folks who get very frustrated if their sex life isn't meeting their needs or their expectations. And the way that they communicate that frustration to their partner can be really gnarly, and it can really override their consent and their desire. And so over the course of the long term in partnership, if that's happened over and over again, it's not surprising to me that people's desire would just be non-existent, right?
Yes.
We don't want something that's being pushed on us typically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks forget that in order to have a sexually thriving relationship, they need to be a partner that is desirable to their partner.
Yeah. So there's this kind of, I mean, I imagine these kind of opposite magnets, the person that's feeling quite entitled to sex, and then the person that's losing desire. I mean, I remember that in my last relationship, which there wasn't a whole lot of sex and it was quite platonic, but it was like, even the littlest things, like if he were to like grab my waist or kind of smack my butt, I'm like, oh, he wants sex. Like it was just this instant rejection and almost resentment. And, I feel like a lot of times the solution is like to have a conversation about it, but that's so much easier said than done.
So much easier said than done.
Even I'm sure as a therapist, it's like you can't. Sometimes it's really hard to get people to to make the jump to have that conversation.
Well, totally. And back to what we were talking about before, a lot of people have an expectation that when they get married, it's their marital duty. I'm putting that word in big air quotes.
Sure.
Also in air quotes, give their partner sex. And this is really terrible conditioning because we are all unique beings, and it's not reasonable to think that you're always going to want to have sex at the same time your partner does. So how do you negotiate and motivate each other to have a climate where desire is possible between you? Will say a lot about the quality and the frequency of your sex life.
Yeah.
But when you come in with this expectation of, I have to do this, or you have to give this to me, well, that's not fun.
No, it's not a thing to give and take. I mean, I feel like even the institution of marriage is, when I think about it, it's like a little cringe. I mean, I'd love to get married someday, but my idea is like eloping and maybe not even signing paperwork. I don't know. It's just like, it's not traditional. But yeah, I mean, even growing up and seeing older movies, it's the wedding night, the wife fulfilling her duty. I mean, it's like we have a lot of indoctrination of what marriage is.
Yes.
And even though I grew up with very open-minded parents, like there was still this societal pressure to not have sex until a certain hypothetical point or after marriage. But that, yeah, you're definitely supposed to do it frequently in marriage for your partner's pleasure, husband's pleasure.
That is the conditioning that a lot of women hear and experience growing up, and men too. And it's, it sets everybody up for frustration and disappointment, because even in those settings, I wonder with the folks that I work with, how frequently they actually want to be sexual versus how frequently they think they should be sexual.
Yeah.
Right? And there's some interesting research that came out a few years ago that folks who had a higher adherence to sort of traditional, rigid gender role expectations had more sex, but they actually reported less desire for it. And they had more sex because they were fulfilling the expectations that they thought came with being a man or a woman.
And was it less pleasure, less enjoyable? Yeah. There was less enjoyment as well, I'm assuming.
Less pleasure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you tell couples when they say like that they think they should be having sex 2-3 times a week, or like these I feel like a lot of couples have these hypothetical numbers that they're concerned about, or they hear their friends having a bunch of sex. I don't know.
I immediately try to get people to stop comparing themselves to other people, because
definitely
there's a lot of mythology that goes around how many times a week people are having sex, and depending on, again, those expectations of how frequently people think they should be having sex. Some people will over-report, some people under-report. So
like, what if it was based on the pleasure and the orgasm, or the new experiences, the novelty? Like, it's not about the frequency.
It's not about the frequency, but when people come in, it is a common question. Like, how many times a week should we be having sex to denote a good, like, healthy relationship? And my answer, this might sound flippant, but it's however many times you both want to.
Yeah.
Each week.
Yeah.
So that's up to you to figure out.
Right. Yeah. Something that I am concerned about, just having the podcast, doing the work I do, I'm concerned about the dramatic difference in sex drive between men and women.
Oh, I don't think that's, I don't think there is a dramatic sex drive organically and biologically between men and women. Yeah, that's not a thing.
Oh, I interact with a lot of men. I have an OnlyFans. And I mean, in my experience, they're coming daily. They're making themselves orgasm daily. And I don't know. It's what I see.
So you remember at the start of our conversation, we talked about how sex can become a vehicle for other things that people need and are trying to communicate with themselves or with other people.
Yes.
This could be an example of that, right? A lot of people will turn to sex to help regulate their emotions. They feel stressed or they feel anxious. Well, guess what? An orgasm elicits all kinds of lovely neurochemicals and feel-good, vibes in the body.
Yeah.
And particularly, an orgasm can help with the production and release of oxytocin. And oxytocin obliterates cortisol in the body, right? It just gives us a nice little wash of feel good.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say what their true desire is versus are they...
What's it a vehicle for?
Yeah. Are they
interesting.
Regulating or medicating themselves with an orgasm? But I know many women who masturbate or have sex daily.
Yeah.
More than one time a day. So there isn't a biological truth here around libido.
Okay.
Yeah.
Specifically, the New York men that I've talked to, it's to clear their head.
Right.
And to decrease stress.
Yeah.
So I've never thought about it that way. I mean, I do feel like my sex drive depends on where I'm at in my hormonal cycle.
Sure.
Not being on birth control, I feel quite overcome by it for about a week and a half of the month. And then it kind of tapers off. But it's always there. But it does ebb and flow.
Yeah. I mean, sure, it can happen, right? Depending on what our hormones are doing.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of the other themes that you've seen that couples come to you with?
Well, probably the most common is a desire discrepancy. One partner wants sex more frequently than the other, and neither is good or bad, right or wrong. So the work that we do is helping them close that gap in a way that honors both of their needs and doesn't push people beyond their boundaries or override someone's no.
Right, because people can want sex at different times, you know? I mean, we have different emotions, and if there's kids involved, there's so much going on, and it's like, and then there can be a fine line of, I'm doing it for them because I love them, and I'm doing it for them, but I don't want to.
Yeah, which is a really interesting question, right? It brings up sort of this idea of how is that helpful maybe in the short term versus the long term? And it's totally okay to want to participate in your partner's pleasure.
Yeah.
And to really appreciate that they might enjoy something that isn't your jam, but you're not opposed to doing it. So this is another area where couples come in a lot. One person might be really kinky, another person might not be. So how do we get to a place where we're both feeling great and enjoying this dynamic?
Right.
So I think the question to really think about is, will saying yes to this in this moment put me at odds with myself? Is it coming from a place of self-abandonment?
Wow.
And if that answer is yes, then I might encourage you not to do it, because in the long run, it may actually create more of a disconnection for you in your own body with pleasure, and it can lead to resentment down the road with your partner.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, my partner really loves this kind of fetish and I don't really feel one way or another about it.
Yeah, but I love them.
I love them, want them to get what they need out of it. I can participate without feeling any particular negative thoughts about it.
Right.
Then it's wonderful to be able to meet each other in ways that help you feel really expressive and really met and have a lot of pleasure.
Yeah. For me, I found that I have quite a busy brain, and that more recently I've requested like partners give me a massage for 10 or 15 minutes, and I can totally get more in my body and get turned on. I'm kind of like, I'm not a 0 to 100 necessarily, but it's like a process for me. And I've heard that from women that sometimes it can be a bit more gradual to reach that like peak arousal. And that's just like a fun hack that I found, is like having my partner help me get into my body, and then I'm able to connect with feeling turned on.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a more responsive style of desire.
Yeah.
And it's very common, especially for people who have a lot going on, or they live more in their head or in their cognitions a lot of the time. Really kind of grounding in the body can help bring them into that space of being able to feel and receive sensations and connect with them more.
Yeah, definitely. My entire life changed when I started tracking my hormones and my menstrual cycle more closely. That's what I love about the Stardust app, is it's far more than a period tracker. It is an entire hormonal health universe inside of an app. It is beautifully designed. It is fun. It is hilarious, and it is extremely educational. It has helped me redefine a relationship with my cycle that makes it much more lighthearted, and it's extremely helpful as you go through the month. Wherever you download your apps, go and search for the Stardust app, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Here's a little secret about those couples that can't keep their hands off of each other. They know that intimacy requires intention. What I love about Aria is that you're getting a custom intimacy expert in your back pocket that is helping design custom fit scenes for you and your partner to bring your fantasies to life and help make sex talk that much easier. Just take one quick quiz and they will handle everything from expert guidance to premium products discreetly delivered. Visit arya.fyi/STR for 15% off. So there's another chapter, Am I a Partner or Parent, in your book. I think when you said it to me the other day, I went, oh. And then when I was listening to it today, you were like, a lot of people's reactions are, oh.
Yes.
So great subject to bring to your therapist, your reaction on that. I'd love to have you speak a bit more to that theme and why that felt so important.
Yeah. This can happen in every relationship, right? Any relationship.
Even not romantic, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the chapter Am I a Partner or a Parent really was written to address the inequities that can really kind of calcify in relationships around emotional labor and domestic labor. And partners can get stuck in these roles, right?
Definitely.
One partner is a little under-functioning as their most adult self, and one partner then is a bit over-functioning and picking up kind of the slack, right?
Yeah.
Now, people get stuck in these roles for lots of different reasons: family of origin, conditioning, gender role socialization, so many things. But what can happen, and what I see a lot, what sex therapists see a lot, couples therapists see a lot, is when one partner is tasked with more, an inequitable amount of emotional or domestic labor, both partners can feel really stale and stagnant in their desire for each other. Because
both.
Yeah, sometimes both, right?
Yeah.
Because both really kind of get stuck. What we're talking about is power.
Yeah,
right.
And an imbalance.
It's a power imbalance, and it's also a directional imbalance in terms of effort and output. So you've got one person who's giving and doing more, and one person who's receiving and benefiting from more. And that is a dynamic that really mirrors a healthy parent-child dynamic, right?
Yeah.
We don't expect our children to do things for us emotionally or to take care of us. That's our job as the adults in the room.
Yes.
But when you have two partners where that dynamic happens, it doesn't feel sexy at all for either of them. There's typically a lot of resentment and unspoken stuff going on there.
Sure. How would you kind of guide that couple to find more of a balance?
Yeah, it usually starts with holding space for the defensive-ness that is an inevitability when you bring the dynamic to light. Because most people don't want to think of themselves as being inequitable partners or contributing in an inequitable way. So I don't think that it's super conscious for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And when you start to bring it up, it can bring up a lot of big feelings. So just kind of holding space for that process to unfold, and then bringing more education and more awareness to how they can negotiate from a place of more equity so that they're both advocating for a win-win for each other.
Yeah.
Right? And that really can change the dynamic in a big way.
Definitely.
But where partners struggle is the follow-through. Right, because
they're
so entrenched.
Routines.
Yeah, they're so entrenched in their everyday way of existing.
Yes.
So it's messy, before it gets better.
Yeah. And I haven't been in a long-term relationship in a while, but the theme of like domestic chores and labor, and it's like, when I think back to my last long-term relationship, I'm like, it was always the fucking dishes. Like, it's funny how much of these like long-term relationships does come down to the balancing of these things that make people feel like it's fair and people are taking responsibility.
There's a really great article that was out several years ago, and I'm not going to get the title of it exactly right, but it was something along the lines like, my wife divorced me because I left my dishes in the sink or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautifully written article written by a guy who got divorced ostensibly because he didn't put his dishes in the sink or in the dishwasher.
That's the final straw.
Right. And the thing is, it was never about the dishes. It was always about the disrespect that she felt over communicating a request for him to not punt this labor to her every day. And over time, she felt consistently disrespected and devalued. And so the dishes it's not about the dishes.
Right.
It's about, I don't feel appreciated, heard, seen. And whether it's a dishes conversation
vacuum,
or laundry, vacuuming,
it's not about the item. It's about how people are being made to feel.
Yeah.
Have you helped patients, female patients specifically, that haven't had orgasms before?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It took me quite a while to realize like I needed a toy to have an orgasm, for example. I think I was like 20. And it was an older friend of mine took me to a sex store and was like, you need to just buy a toy.
That's a good friend, by the way.
A good friend, yes. Yeah. And I mean, it changed my life. It's like, oh, this is what sex is supposed to be, that, but also oftentimes an orgasm for me if I want one, and I need to bring a toy into the bedroom for that. What does that look like? And then have you encountered people feeling like it might be part of a competition with toys or I don't know.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of myths around how people could or should again in quotes have orgasms, and a lot of folks really love the romantic idea of having an orgasm through penetration alone.
Totally. I would love to still someday, but it's
not possible for some people.
Yeah.
And even sort of vaginally, those internal orgasms are often brought about through the internal stimulation of the clitoris. So when we look at clitoral stimulation, whether it's external or internal, that's really the holy juicy grail. And when you open up your mind to getting more creative in how you get there with a partner or by yourself, it really is super rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And some partners do feel a little bit self-conscious or afraid that bringing a toy in will make them replaceable, or that it means that there's something wrong with how they have sex.
Right.
And while it's so understandable to have some fears or to feel like you might not be an adequate lover, I really encourage folks to remember that our anatomy are really tricky sometimes.
Yes.
And the more you can collaborate with your partner to bring other solutions forward, the more it becomes a reality that you are part of what is bringing the orgasm into fruition. And that's really meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like the busier life gets, it's like, I really love non-penetrative sex acts.
Mm-hmm.
I think mutual masturbation is fun. I think there's just other things to do. And I think because of conditioning and how we look at sex in the media, I think a lot of couples probably think, many might see that this is how we have sex. This is what we classify as sex.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always want to mess up my hair. Sometimes I've got places to be.
Right?
Exactly. It might be sweaty sometimes. I don't know. It's just, there's other things to do. I think that's important.
Yeah. I don't have time for a midday shower.
No.
And all of that sometimes. Yeah.
How has your work and all you've learned impacted or helped your personal life or dating life?
I love this question so much. I think a lot of folks think that sex therapists are like dangling from the chandeliers and having orgies every weekend.
Oh my gosh. I was going to ask if it's made you jaded.
No, I think for many sex therapists, myself included, this work really can set about a huge personal growth spurt and exploration in expansiveness. And a lot of what we do in our training as sex therapists is as much about unlearning stuff as it is about learning stuff. And
that's great.
Yeah, that awareness has really opened up a lot more possibilities for pleasure in my personal life, as it does with the folks that I work with professionally.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What kind of other things do they help you unlearn? I mean, I feel like we've talked about a lot of them, but
Well, I think, as we mentioned, a lot of folks get these implicit and explicit messages about what they should or should not do, and when or how or in what context.
Yeah.
And a big part of the unlearning, I think, is letting go of shame. And
definitely.
Yeah, a lot of prohibition around how to get pleasure or when people are quote unquote worthy of pleasure, right? A lot of people punt their pleasure, and they'll say things like, I can't have sex because I don't like how my body looks, or I can't have sex because I won't be in a relationship with that person. I can't have sex because I need to have this much money in my portfolio, and then I'll be
we make up a lot of rules for ourselves.
We do, and they're not always conscious, and they're not always things that we are literally thinking. But we put up a lot of roadblocks around pleasure.
Interesting.
And so, I think part of the biggest takeaway for me in this work is that pleasure really is a human right. And that doesn't mean we have a right to have sex with anyone we want to have sex with, but it means that we are capable of pleasure as a species. So sexually and non-sexually, pleasure is important in our day-to-day worlds. And we get to experience it without there being any prerequisites.
That's beautiful. I love the list you shared of the silly little kind of rules we put on ourselves of when we deserve it. I mean, I think a big one for women is visual appearance. I've definitely encountered that personally, just saying, well, and I'm even in a spot right now where I'd like to lose weight, and it's like, well, maybe I'll feel sexier 10 pounds. But I mean, I think as women with the beauty standards all around us, it's kind of never ending. I'm sure I could find something else after the 10 pounds.
Right.
But I see that within myself. And then there's just, it's complicated.
It can be. Yeah, it can be really complicated. And that's just not true. It's not just true for women. I think men have a lot of
definitely
fears around how their bodies are perceived and are they desirable too. I think women's bodies are critiqued more publicly, and so we have a greater public discourse around it, which can leave women feeling more susceptible to criticism about their own bodies. But I think it's fairly universal human.
That's true. Totally
fear.
True. Yeah. Look, I am a vibrator girl through and through. However, I think it's really fun and important to bring in an element of penetration to solo or partnered play. That is why I'm excited to share with you guys the Solina line of hyper-realistic dildos brought to you by Peep Show Toys. They are a line of 3 different sizes of super realistic dual density silicone dildos. Not only do they feel and look extremely realistic, but on the inside you have a thicker, more dense silicone, so it really does feel like a real erection. Get 10% off of your entire order at peepshowtoys.com using code SEGGS, SEGGS. If you are watching or listening to this, you're probably interested in sex and or kink and are curious about finding new partners to explore things with. However, it can be difficult to find those people. The thing I love about the HUD app is that it's more than just an app. They have a community, a podcast, and a ton of education. And inside of their app is a bedroom feature, so you can select all of the things you're interested in, all of the things you want to try, all of the things you don't want to try, and that can be shown to potential future partners. So to learn more, go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/sextalk, SEGGSTALK. Yeah. And I feel like men also have a lot of expectations or fears around their penis size and shape and insecurities. And I mean, I've had times where a man has kind of asked me where he stands, and he won't even believe me when I tell him that he's above average or whatever that even means, And I think you're totally right. All genders bring a lot of insecurity to the table with that, and it's so vulnerable. Sex is so fucking vulnerable, and I find it kind of fascinating if I'm having casual encounter with somebody where I'm like, it's funny that it's casual, but this is the most intimate, vulnerable thing. And something I'm working on in therapy is, well, why am I so comfortable with that?
Yeah.
With the intense vulnerability being with a stranger.
Yeah.
But,
that is
working on it.
Yeah. Maybe a different conversation.
Yes, but I do find it fascinating. The word casual is used, yet it is really this kind of special sacred thing, regardless of how it shakes out.
It can be, right? I think this is one of those myths about sex that people hold on to. And I want to make sure I'm really careful on how I articulate this.
Yeah.
Sex can be sacred. It can be spiritual. It can be meaningful in so many ways.
Yes.
It also can be about an activity. Right? It's about the meaning that we attach to it. And so when we talk about casual sex, I think it's important to delineate what does that really mean? Because I think it
depends on the dynamic and circumstance.
It does. And you can have a really connective experience in a casual encounter. You can have a really vulnerable experience. You can have a spiritual experience, even in a one-time sexual interaction.
Right.
And you can be in a committed partnership with someone for years and have a completely flat, meaningless set of sexual activities that you do that don't bring you any sort of zhuzh in these other domains of life, if you will. So I think we get to be a little bit more intentional around how do we define it, what are we bringing to it, and what are our expectations and what we want to take away.
Totally. I actually deleted my dating apps 3 weeks ago, which was so far it's been quite wonderful. I have struggled with addiction before, and I was just seeing like the dopamine that I was chasing from these swipes and these short interactions. And even the sexual experiences I was seeking, I didn't feel like they were the healthiest for me or for the other person.
Okay.
And, I think dating apps are a loaded thing, but I can literally say the main word I feel now is like peace, having deleted them.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah. And I've been really enjoying it because I'm finding myself like chatting with a guy in line for coffee or going to more meetups and social events. And that's been really a nice reframe on my romantic life.
Yeah.
I think that, I had a lot of more casual hookup sex for quite a long time, and it was fun and I learned a lot and it was kinky. And now I'm like, I kind of know what I want. Yeah. And I don't know where I was going with that. Just, I think dating apps are very prevalent, but the more people I talk to, they seem quite dissatisfied.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. I think dating apps can be very useful in expanding the opportunity to meet people.
Right.
But one of the downsides to the dating app is that it's an app. And so our interface with someone is really two-dimensional.
Yes.
And so there can be a lot of projection, a lot of fantasy, a lot of dopamine.
God, totally.
And then
this is the one.
Yeah.
Like, you haven't met him, Thea. Come on.
right. Suddenly you're like planning your wedding cake topper. Yeah, all kinds of things. And then the reality is often very different, right, of who we are, because we're all multidimensional beings, and that doesn't carry in a dating app.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was finding myself getting very excited and then showing up and instantly realizing there wasn't that spark. Yeah. Whereas the approach I'm taking to dating now of going out, it starts with a spark. It starts with an attraction and a curiosity and just reading somebody's energy. And I think that's a little bit what dating apps miss is like that spark and that, like, I love hearing people tell stories of when they met somebody and it was out in the wild, because it's always so cute and random. And like, they kind of had this knowing. So reading somebody's energy is very interesting because it's like, just drawn to them. I think the comfort for me of swiping at home alone was not worth it and was not leading me to my dream relationship. So,
well, it's also because it's a technology. It becomes sort of this like gamified experience.
Definitely.
Yeah. And just like we might swipe from social media post to social media post.
Right.
That somatic practice of swiping and scrolling and swiping, whether we're doing it this way or this way.
That's a good point.
It can kind of create like a numbness, right, in us.
Yes.
Because we tend to be less present.
Yeah. And that feeling of, there's just always more. There's more people, maybe something better. And there's billions of dollars being spent to make it more addictive. That's really interesting. I'm curious to see what the future kind of generations hold. What kind of trends are you seeing between intergenerational clients?
I mean, I'm seeing that younger folks are having less partnered sex in person, and they might be having more digital forms of sex.
Oh, interesting.
Or solo sex. But less partnered sex in person. Than previous generations at the same age. So I think we are already seeing a bit of the effects of technology and how people interact in general.
Definitely.
But I think we're going to reach a tipping point where a lot of folks get really burnt out with technology and they realize that they need something more community and somatically organized.
Yes, definitely. I'm curious to dive into infidelity a little bit. I think it's an interesting subject and quite common. I would love for you to share a little bit about your thoughts on it or how you...
How much time do we have?
We got time. I also think, there's different kind of categories of it and it's varied, but I mean, it impacts so many relationships.
It does. And I think it's important to remember that people engage in infidelity for a lot of different reasons, but
definitely,
certainly in our modern times, it is difficult for a lot of folks to be in a monogamous relationship for a long period of time with one person because our lifespans just...
I was going to ask if that, what your thoughts were on that.
Totally. We're living a lot longer than we used to. And so we thrive with a bit of novelty. It doesn't always have to be the most extreme novelty, but over time, you kind of learn your partner inside and out. And that comes with all kinds of benefits. But one of the downsides is sort of an absence of novelty, unless the partners are really committed to a lot of personal growth, a lot of relational growth, which can spark that novelty again in the dynamic. But coupled with the reality that monogamy was sort of invented as a construct at some point in our patriarchal history.
Institution of marriage.
There are lots of different, there's a continuum, right, for people who feel better in more monogamous dynamics and people who feel better in non-monogamous dynamics. So we just don't have a default setting as humans. And I think we try to conform to an expectation of monogamy in a mononormative and heteronormative world. So I think a lot of folks are trying to fit themselves into a box that just really doesn't align for them.
And what about couples that aren't like listening to our podcasts and reading about E&M, but they find that it works for them further down the line? I'm sure you see that happen as well.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Even in couples who won't admit it publicly. They are a lot, I think a lot of folks want to procure their relationship. They have a lot of love and care and safety and security with their partner. They are best friends and they really want their partner to have the best life possible as well as themselves have the best life possible. So I work with lots of folks who are willing to get creative in how they protect their partnership and also have a relationship with sex that feels really exciting. So there's a lot of possibilities for people who want to explore.
Yes. I love that. And I love hearing you say that you have a lot of couples that are exploring and learning. I think that people listening need to hear that, like, it's possible and that it's actually happening, whether or not their friends are even telling them maybe that they're doing it, especially older generations are going to keep that quite behind closed doors. But I think that there are lots of people getting curious or having more don't ask, don't tell type dynamics. But I mean, when you've built something with somebody for decades, it's going to be nuanced and there's got to be options.
Yeah. I mean, when you've been with someone for that long, who you were at the start of your relationship is likely going to be very different in many ways to the person that you are as you've had lots of life, lots of positive experiences, hard experiences. We are dynamic beings, right? And so the more we make room for that evolution for yourself and your partner, or partners, the more space you can create for safety in the relationship.
Definitely. I love that. Are there any other themes from the book that you'd like to chat about? Anything you enjoyed writing or researching? Any fun stats?
I think maybe one of the things that I want to emphasize about the book is that pleasure can be one of those places that we neglect in our lives. And
definitely,
right? We are all busy in our own ways. We have demands on us all the time. And so for a lot of folks, they sort of evacuate their body and they sort of live in a cognitive headspace because right? When you're busy, you're like, I have to do all these things. You become a human doing instead of a human being. So the practice of reclaiming pleasure is also a practice of reclaiming an embodied experience of yourself.
When you said that, I was thinking about where on the priority list is, let's say, my self-pleasure, because I'm in kind of a single non-dating era. And it's literally usually when I have no more meetings and there's nothing on my to-do list and the kitchen is clean. I mean, it is really low on the priority list. I'd never really thought about it like that. It's mostly when I have kind of, weird open absent time in the middle of the day. or the mood strikes, but it really is not something that I intentionally prioritize.
Yeah.
Even though I'm probably doing it more than some. Like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true for many people, sexually and non-sexually. So when I'm working with people who are having a hard time prioritizing sexual pleasure, I'm really curious about what their relationship is like with their body in general and with non-sexual pleasure. So a really simple prescription to start with might be to really indulge in a nice smelling lotion or body oil, something that texturally and fragrantly works for you and you are excited about. And like maybe spending some time really putting the lotion on your body, experiencing the sensations, the texture, the smell, and how it feels to just even touch your own body.
Wow, definitely.
Yeah.
It can be foreign for many people.
It can. And really to do it in a mindful way. And when we start practicing that more and more, we open ourselves up for more sensitivity around sensation.
Yes.
And then that excites us. And we want more. And we want more pleasure.
That also makes me think of when I do self-pleasure, how fast it is. The whole process is like magic wand, bed, porn, orgasm. And it's like...
It's like 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Whoa, yeah, like 5 minutes probably. And so thinking about even just that slowness of giving myself a massage before, what is that saying about the love that I'm giving my body in other ways, you know? Yeah. And, you know, even that becomes, when it's solo pleasure, it becomes so routine so easily. And it's like, I'll save the fun creativity for something with a partner. But I think it's interesting that it could be a reflection of our relationships with our body. Yeah.
I recently gave a talk at a college for survivors of sexual assault and how to have hot sex after
that's amazing.
Sexual trauma. Yeah,
wow.
It was lovely. And this is one of the things that we talk a lot about is how do you create safety in your body after something has been so horrifically imposed on you.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the best strategies for anyone, but especially for survivors, is to get reacquainted with how they feel in their body when they're in control of the sensations that are happening.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Wow. So you do speaking and writing as well. Okay, that's very cool. I love that universities are open to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Some universities do a really nice job of bringing in resources for their students around anything related to sexual health or mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Probably my website is the best place to start, modernintimacy.com, or they can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Dr. Kate Balestrieri and on YouTube at Modern Intimacy.
Amazing. How has TikTok been for you?
Oh, TikTok was awesome a few years ago.
Yes, before the censorship stuff.
Yeah, before censorship. And also, I think when it was early in its American introduction. It's a bit more stagnant now.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could see it resonating, your work resonating on there. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting today. This has been lovely. Thanks for your New York pit stop.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Yeah, and I hope you have a great vacation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode today. Be sure to stay in touch with us on socials at Seggs Talk Radio Podcast. That is SEGGS Talk Radio Podcast.